I was sitting on the edge of the bed, sweating through my nightshirt, head pounding when my daughter told me I had to leave. Just like that. No hesitation, no softness in her voice, just the firm, clipped tone of someone dealing with an inconvenience. She said it was because I had a fever and her son had asthma, and she couldn't take the risk. I remember staring at her, thinking maybe I hadn't heard right. I'd helped raise her children, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and now I was being asked to get out like a house guest who overstayed her welcome. She handed me $7 and told me there was a shelter near the bus station. I didn't know what hurt more, my joints, my chest, or the way she looked past me like I was already gone. I picked up my old suitcase, packed what little I owned, and stepped into the cold night. Unsure where I'd sleep or who I even was without a roof to stand under. My name is Gloria Fisher. I'm 62, a widow, a mother, and up until that night, I thought I still had a place in my family. Turns out, I was wrong. What happened after that was something I never could have planned, but it was the beginning of something I didn't even know I'd been waiting for. When my husband Joe passed, Melissa suggested I sell the house and move in with her family. She said it would be good for everyone, that I shouldn't be alone at my age. I thought she meant it, and maybe she did at first. We used the money from the sale of my home to help with the down payment on her bigger house. She called it a fresh start. I told myself it was a gift, a way to stay close to my grandkids and not be that lonely widow everyone whispers about. At first, it worked. I had a small upstairs room, just big enough for a twin bed, a chair, and a dresser. It wasn't much, but I made it cozy, with a quilt and a few framed photos. Melissa called it the guest room, even though there were never any guests. Each morning I'd wake before anyone else. I'd start the coffee, pack school lunches, and set out breakfast. Eli liked toast with peanut butter, Sophie didn't like crusts. Their little voices filled the kitchen while they played with tablets and ignored the food I made. Melissa rushed through the house most mornings, already dressed for work, shouting into her phone about some crisis in marketing. She barely looked up when she handed off the kids to me. I'd take them to school, then come home to do laundry, sweep floors, and clean bathrooms. Nobody asked me to do those things, but nobody stopped me either. It was as if the work just appeared, and I disappeared with it. I became the one who folded socks, scrubbed toilets, and picked up forgotten toys from under the couch. There were no thank yous, no shared dinners, no talks about how I was doing. When I mentioned my back aching or my knees flaring up, Melissa would roll her eyes and say I should stop complaining. Over time, I stopped mentioning it. Once, I tried showing Sophie an old photo album from when Melissa was a little girl. She glanced for a second, then ran off. Melissa said later that I shouldn't try to live in the past, but what else did I have? The present didn't have much space for me. I had dreams once. When I was 19, I wanted to study photography. I dreamed of traveling, capturing light through a lens, showing the world what I saw. Then Joe and I got married. Melissa came soon after. The camera stayed in the back of the closet. I don't regret loving them. I don't regret being a wife or a mother, but I do regret how easily I gave up myself without realizing it. The days began to blur together. Wake up, care for others, go to bed, start over. There was no rhythm to call my own. I wasn't Gloria anymore. I was just Grandma. Or worse, the woman upstairs. Still, I stayed. I kept showing up. I told myself this was family, that love sometimes looked like sacrifice, that maybe this was just how things worked when you got older. I thought I had a place in that house. I thought I mattered. But now, looking back, I see the truth. I wasn't living. I was just filling a space no one wanted to fill themselves. And eventually, even that became too much for them. The fever had crept in sometime that afternoon. My body felt heavy and my skin burned, while the room swayed around me. I lay down for just a moment after folding the last load of laundry, hoping it would pass. When Melissa came home, the sky was already dark. She walked in with her heels clicking against the hardwood, her phone still pressed to her ear. She glanced toward me on the couch like I was something left out of place. "The kids said you've been acting strange all day. What's wrong with you?" I tried to sit up and answer, but my voice came out in a rasp. "I think I have a fever. My whole body aches." She paused for just a second. I thought maybe she'd sit down beside me, touch my forehead, or offer a glass of water. Instead, she stepped back. You probably have the flu. I can't get sick. Neither can the kids. I have a major client pitch on Friday. Her voice was clipped. Cool. She wasn't angry. She was managing a problem. I told her I'd taken medicine, that I just needed rest. But she shook her head like she'd already made a decision. You need to leave. Mom. At first, I thought she meant leave the room. I blinked, trying to understand her face. Leave where? She folded her arms. I don't know. A hotel? A friend's place? There's a shelter near the center. You can take the car and park it downtown. I'll pick it up later. I stared at her. Melissa, I don't have anywhere to go. I haven't kept in touch with anyone since I moved in here. You know that. She let out a breath like I was being dramatic. Come on, it's not forever. Just a few days. You'll be fine. I can't risk Eli's asthma flaring up. You're a health risk right now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, I looked around that living room, the one I had vacuumed every week, the couch where I sat up with Sophie when she had night terrors, the kitchen that still smelled faintly of the soup I'd made that morning. It wasn't mine. None of it ever was. She disappeared for a moment and came back holding a few crumpled bills. $7. She tossed them onto the coffee table. That should cover the bus, maybe get a tea or something. There's that place near Lincoln and 9th. They take people overnight. Her words landed like cold rain. You're kicking me out. Her jaw tightened. Don't be so dramatic. I just can't get sick right now. My job is on the line. I whispered the only thing I could. I raised you. I took care of you when you were sick. I gave you everything. She didn't flinch. I don't need a sick mother right now. You're already a burden. Now you're a risk. I felt something snap inside. Not loudly, not all at once. More like thread pulled slowly until it gave out. I stood up. My legs trembled. I'll pack. Only take your things. Nothing we bought for you. Her voice was sharp, businesslike, like this was a meeting to wrap up. I went upstairs to the little room I called mine. I opened the closet and pulled out the suitcase I hadn't touched in years. The zipper stuck for a second. I filled it with a few sweaters, a toothbrush, a scarf Joe had given me once. I slipped in an old photo of the two of us from a camping trip in '85, one paperback novel, my arthritis medication. That was it. I left behind everything else. The slippers Melissa bought me for Christmas but never unwrapped herself. The mug that said best grandma that Sophie gave me 3 birthdays ago. The quilt I spent 3 winters stitching, still folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Melissa stood at the doorway tapping her foot. It's past the kids' bedtime. You're spreading germs. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice anymore. She handed me the keys without another word. I walked past her down the stairs. Nobody followed. Nobody watched. I stepped out into the night air, which hit my lungs like ice. The sky was cloudy, streetlights humming low. I got into the car, started the engine, and drove through streets I'd memorized from years of school runs and grocery trips. This time, it felt different, like none of it belonged to me. I pulled into the supermarket parking lot where she told me to leave the car. I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, the fever still swimming in my head. Then I left the keys in the glove box, grabbed my suitcase, and stepped out. The sidewalk was slick from earlier rain. A neon sign across the street flickered, half lit. No one looked my way. Just a sick old woman with no home, no plan, and $7 in her coat pocket. The wind cut through my coat as I dragged my suitcase along Main Street. My legs were weak, and the fever made everything look hazy. Storefronts were closed and dark, shadows stretching long across the sidewalk. I passed a bus stop and sat for a minute on the metal bench, the chill pressing into my spine. I didn't know where to go. My fingers fumbled with the crumpled bills Melissa had thrown at me, but they offered no comfort. Across the street, a small café still had its lights on. The sign above the door said Willow and Maple, and the glow from inside spilled onto the sidewalk like it was trying to hold back the night. Through the window, I could see soft lamps, wood-paneled walls, and a woman behind the counter wiping down trays. I hesitated, not sure I had the strength to cross, but I stood anyway, pulled my suitcase behind me, and pushed the door open. A small bell above the frame chimed gently as I stepped inside. The warmth hit me instantly. The air smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread, and soft jazz played from a speaker in the corner. It was almost too much. My throat tightened from the sudden shift. The woman behind the counter looked up. She was around my age, maybe younger, with kind eyes and a ponytail streaked with gray. She took one look at me and didn't flinch, just nodded once and said good evening like I was expected. I cleared my throat. Just a cup of tea, the hottest you've got. She nodded and turned to the kettle without asking questions. My suitcase slumped against the counter like it needed a break as badly as I did. She placed a steaming mug in front of me. Her name tag read, Diane. I reached for my coat pocket and counted out the coins and wrinkled dollars. How much? $2.50. Her voice was soft, not pitying, just simple and steady. I paid, leaving me with just under $5. It felt ridiculous, trying to hold on to money when I didn't even have a pillow for the night. Behind the register was a display with scratch-off tickets stacked beneath a little sign that read, Feeling Lucky. I stared at them for a moment. Maybe it was the fever. Maybe it was just needing something to do. I pointed at one. I'll take one of those too. First time. Diane handed it over without a word and slid the rest of my change back across the counter. I tucked the ticket into my coat pocket without even looking at it. I sat at a corner booth with my tea. The warmth seeped into my hands as I wrapped them around the cup. My body was still aching, but the pain had stopped shouting and started whispering. Diane walked over a few minutes later and slid into the opposite seat. You okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to answer. She didn't press. Just said we've got a spare room upstairs. It's not fancy. Small bed? Clean sheets? If you need a place to sleep, it's there. I stared at her, unsure what to say. I didn't want charity, but I didn't have anything else. Thank you. That's kind of you. Her eyes softened. Not kindness, just humanity. She led me through a narrow back stairwell, the steps creaking under my weight. At the top was a plain door with a tiny brass number 1. Inside was a narrow room with a small bed, a lamp, and a dresser. The walls were pale blue. There was a folded quilt at the end of the mattress. The window looked out onto the alley, where snow was starting to fall in tiny flurries. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed and exhaled, for what felt like the first time in hours. Diane left without saying more, the door clicking quietly behind her. I didn't cry. I was too tired for that. I pulled the quilt over me and felt my body tremble. The fever still pulsed behind my eyes, but the silence wasn't sharp like it was back at the house. It was soft. Held. I reached into my pocket and touched the lottery ticket. Didn't scratch it. Just held it. I didn't believe in luck. I didn't believe in signs, but I needed to believe in something. That night, in a borrowed room above a café owned by a stranger, I let myself rest. Not because I knew things would be okay, but because someone made space for me without needing anything in return. And that, for the first time in a long while, felt like enough. The sunlight crept in through the narrow window and brushed the edge of the bed. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then the quiet, the unfamiliar ceiling, the faint smell of coffee downstairs brought it all back. I sat up slowly. My head was still heavy, but the fever had broken. The world didn't spin when I moved, and my breath no longer came with a shiver. The room was simple but warm. I ran my fingers along the quilt, then reached for my coat hanging on the chair. Inside the pocket, the lottery ticket was still there, folded and untouched. It felt silly to take it out, like playing pretend in a life that had no room for fantasy. But I did. I placed it on the nightstand and stared at it for a long minute. Maybe it was nothing, just a piece of cardboard and cheap ink. Or maybe it was something else. Something to look forward to, even for just a second. I found a coin in my bag and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were still shaky. I rubbed the silver patches one by one. The numbers appeared 750, 750, 750. I froze. I blinked, then rubbed again. It didn't change. I stood up too fast and had to steady myself against the dresser. That couldn't be right. I walked down the narrow staircase, the ticket clenched in my hand. Diane was already behind the counter, arranging pastries on a tray. Her smile was easy, like we'd known each other for longer than a single night. I held up the ticket and said, "I think I need your eyes on this." She took it from me, read it, and her eyebrows lifted. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me again, slower this time, like trying to match the woman in front of her with the numbers in her hand. Then she smiled. "You didn't just win something. You won the jackpot?" I laughed, not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. I had walked into her cafe the night before with $7 and a fever. Now she was telling me I had $750,000. I had never held more than a few hundred at once. I didn't have a bank account anymore. I didn't even have a mailing address. I said all of that out loud, and Diane just nodded. "My nephew Mason works at a bank. He's solid, trustworthy. I'll call him. Let's do this right." She poured me another cup of tea and told me to sit. Mason arrived an hour later, tall and calm in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans. He shook my hand like I was someone worth taking seriously. He confirmed the ticket, explained the process, taxes, paperwork, secure claiming. He told me I would likely walk away with around $520,000 after everything was filed. I nodded along, trying to absorb words that didn't feel like they belonged to me. He said to keep it quiet for now, not to talk to press, not to call anyone until the claim was processed. "People change around money," he said, "especially family." That last part made something twist in my chest. Melissa's face flashed in my mind, but I pushed it aside. This moment wasn't about her. After he left, I sat in the booth by the window and watched the street outside. A mother walked past with her daughter, holding a balloon. Two teenagers rode by on bikes, laughing at something I couldn't hear. The world hadn't shifted, but something in me had. This wasn't just about money. It was about time, space, options. It was the first time in years that I could make a choice without waiting for someone else's permission. I wasn't sure what to do next. But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel like fear. It felt like freedom. And it was mine. The apartment wasn't big. It sat above a flower shop near the library, with creaky floors and windows that stuck when it rained. But it had a kitchen with sunlight in the morning and a quiet corner for reading. I signed the lease with hands that trembled from disbelief. My name was on the paperwork. My name was on the mailbox. After years of living in someone else's house, that meant everything. I bought a secondhand sofa and a small table, a blue kettle, a bookshelf I filled slowly, one title at a time. The space wasn't much, but it felt like mine. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The first thing I did was make a doctor's appointment. I hadn't been in years. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and waiting, but the nurse smiled like I belonged there. The doctor prescribed new medication for my arthritis and asked me questions that didn't end in impatience. Next, I joined a gentle yoga class at the community center. I worried I'd be the oldest one there, but I wasn't. Some women moved easily, others didn't. No one stared when I sat in the back and moved slowly. After class, we shared tea in paper cups and talked about silly things that made me feel real again. Then one morning, I walked into a salon. The last time I had my hair cut professionally, Melissa was still in high school. The stylist looked at my gray curls and smiled. "Let's shape it, not cover it. Make it yours." I walked out with short layers that framed my face. I didn't look younger. I looked like someone who had chosen to see herself. When I passed a window, I paused, not to check for flaws, but to say hello. Back at the café, Diane hugged me tight when she saw the change. Her approval wasn't loud, just a nod and a soft, "You look like yourself." I started helping at the café a few hours a week. I worked the register, wiped down tables, and chatted with the morning crowd. People said thank you. They remembered my name. No one called me a burden. No one needed me to be quiet or small. Each day had shape now, a rhythm I could call my own. I cooked for myself. I played old records. I sat by the window with tea and watched the street go by without having to rush anywhere. It didn't happen all at once, but the grief I carried began to loosen. Not because I forgot what happened, but because I finally had space to breathe. Starting over wasn't glamorous. There were lonely moments, quiet nights, days when doubt crept back in like cold air through a cracked window. But there was also peace. The kind that comes when no one is watching, when you no longer have to prove your worth by staying useful. I wasn't chasing youth. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was building something small and steady, a life that fit me, a life that felt like mine. It was a quiet morning when my phone buzzed. I had just finished my tea and was sitting by the window, flipping through the community paper. The headline was still on the front page. Local woman wins big at Willow and Maple. I saw the name on the screen before the ring finished. Melissa? My stomach tightened. It had been 2 weeks since she told me to leave. 2 weeks of silence. No texts, no questions, no apology. I held the phone in my hand and watched it vibrate. My heart wanted to believe it was something real, that maybe she had finally realized what she did, but I knew better. I let it ring once more before answering. "Hi," I said, my voice steady, not cold, just plain. There was a pause. Then her voice came, light and sugary. "Mom, is it true? Did you really win $750,000? No, hello, no, how are you, just the number." I said yes, because it was true. I didn't offer more. She shifted quickly into a tone I hadn't heard in years. Sweet, warm, full of concern. "We were so worried. The kids miss you. We all do. That house hasn't been the same without you." I said nothing for a beat. Let the silence carry the weight. "You mean, since you kicked me out?" Let's call it what it was. Another pause. She sighed. "I know. I was under a lot of pressure. It was a terrible night. I didn't mean what I said. I listened. Not because I believed her, but because I needed to hear the story she was telling herself. The apology felt hollow, timed too well. Coincidence rarely came 2 weeks late and one headline deep. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but you didn't call to check if I had a place to sleep. Not once. Not until the news broke." Her voice softened again. "I didn't know how to fix it, but I want to. Please, let's meet. The kids would love to see you." The mention of Eli and Sophie pulled at something in me. I missed them. I missed their little voices and the chaos of their backpacks on the floor. "All right," I said. "Let's meet. But not at your house." I gave her the address to Willow and Maple. Diane's place, neutral ground, familiar walls, a space where I felt steady. "We'll meet tomorrow at 3. I told her. She agreed quickly, too quickly, like someone closing a deal. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was done hoping she'd be someone different, but I was ready to look her in the eye, not as the mother desperate for her place back, but as a woman who had finally claimed her own. I got to the café early, the same booth by the window, same soft music playing in the background. I held a cup of herbal tea in both hands and let the warmth settle my breath. At exactly 3, the door opened. Melissa walked in wearing a beige coat and heels that clicked on the tile. Eli and Sophie rushed ahead of her, their faces lit up when they saw me. They ran to me without hesitation. Sophie wrapped her arms around my waist. Eli leaned into my shoulder. "You look different, Grandma." I smiled and brushed his hair back. "I feel different too." Melissa stood back, her eyes scanning me. She blinked like she hadn't expected the change. I stood up and greeted her with a nod, then motioned to the booth. We all sat, the kids sipping milkshakes Diane had brought over with a wink. For a while, we danced around the real things. Melissa asked how I was feeling, if I was staying with someone. She stirred her coffee and said it must be nice to have time to rest. Her voice was pleasant, controlled, like reading from a prepared script. I told her I had rented a small apartment, near the library, quiet, clean. She blinked again, surprised. "Oh, I thought maybe you'd come back. The house isn't the same without you." I met her eyes. "Why would I come back?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her face. "Because we're family. Because we can fix this. The kids miss you. I miss you." I nodded slowly. 2 weeks ago, I was a burden, a risk. What's changed? She shifted, her smile faltering. That night was awful. I panicked. I said things I didn't mean. No, I said it gently, but firmly. You didn't panic. You calculated. You looked at me and made a decision that I was disposable. She looked down at her hands. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her napkin. Mom, I'm trying. Let's just move past it. Come home. We can make you comfortable. You won't have to lift a finger. We'll even get you a private doctor. There it was, the slip. Now that I have money, you're ready to have me back. She stiffened. Don't be like that. I came because I care. No. You came because I'm valuable again, because I'm not a problem anymore. I turned to Eli and Sophie, who were watching with wide eyes. I love you both so much. You can visit me anytime. My door will always be open. Melissa stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped the floor. You'll regret this. You'll die alone. I stood too, calm, steady. I'd rather live alone in peace than stay where I'm only wanted when I'm useful. She grabbed her purse and guided the kids out with tight hands. Sophie looked back once, confused. I gave her a small smile, then sat back down as the door closed behind them. My hands trembled slightly, but my heart didn't. It beat strong in my chest like it had finally remembered how to belong to me. That conversation didn't change Melissa. It changed me. I had nothing to prove anymore. No place to beg for. I had chosen myself, and that choice would never be taken from me again. The sun was starting to set as I walked along the lake path. The water shimmered in soft gold, and the breeze carried just enough chill to remind me fall was near. Leaves danced across the sidewalk, skittering like they were in no rush to land. I paused near a bench and took out my phone. It had been a long time, but his number was still there. Walter picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. Dinner tonight? He asked. I smiled and said yes. We agreed on a quiet place, somewhere with soup and good bread. It didn't need to be fancy. As I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket, I felt something shift inside. Not a loss, not a wound, just space. Room for something new to grow. I thought back to all the years I gave away, not out of regret, but from understanding. I had spent so much time trying to earn a place in a family that no longer saw me. Now, I gave that place to myself. No one tells you how quiet freedom is, how still. It doesn't shout or demand. It waits for you to choose it. And I did. I chose dignity. I chose peace. I chose me. This isn't the end of my story. Not even close. It's the first page I've written for myself in a very long time. I used to think that love meant staying quiet, doing more, and never asking for anything in return. But what I've learned is that dignity comes when you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Even if it takes 62 years, it's never too late to say enough. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love less. It means you love wiser. It means you finally understand your worth. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been made to feel small in your own family, I hope this story reminds you that you're not alone. I hope it gives you the courage to take one small step back to yourself. And if it did, I'd love to hear your story in the comments.